Hello guys, welcome to another video. The Lament of an Immortal, Worlds Collide by Ch21. Chapter 21. The Witch's Guilt. In a desolate, despondent landscape, full of hopelessness and frustration, a blinding light manifested itself on the battlefield. Two titans fought relentlessly, the roar of battle intensified every second, auras of light and darkness clashed against each other. The Demon Lord and the Herald of the Gods were still immersed in the conflict. The fight had surpassed everything. The collision of powers between these two eradicated the existence of life in this world. The bodies of both were deteriorating due to the excessive power they emanated, however, neither would yield to anything. With the sole purpose of revenge in their minds, both had already lost all hope. Near the battle, a soul in pain cried out to them without being able to make itself heard. In this case it was a spirit. "That's enough, you have to stop," shouted Nerida, the spirit pillar of water, while holding in her arms the bloodied body of the one she once called granddaughter. The words came out, but they reached deaf ears. Nothing mattered anymore to those two. Ashes furrowed in the wind that exerted the attacks of the opponents, ashes from the bodies of those who once both called allies. "Grandmother Nerida. What's going on?" Azusa questioned, but upon realizing that her grandmother was carrying her lifeless body she shuddered. "What?" she questioned in astonishment as she saw her body in front of her, as the battle raged on. "Honey, why did you do it?" Nerida questioned in tears as she lightly wiped the face of her granddaughter's body with her hand. That was when Azusa began to remember. The battle had intensified. After Rimuru was corrupted by those souls, he had become more erratic. At last, the Demon King had buckled, and in an attempt to embed his sword back into the heart of the Herald of the Gods, he intensified his attacks. As his attacks grew stronger, Tuya's fatigue was evident. Rimuru, with his abysmal power, used part of his energy to attack Tuya as well as create two clones of himself to prevent Azusa from interfering in the battle. Tuya, the god heir, could barely block the Demon Lord's attacks. His exhaustion was becoming more evident as the conflict continued. "You are the embodiment of all evil, Tempest. Your aggressions against all worlds must stop," Tuya pointed out as he blocked her attacks. "And you're just a stupid person standing in my way. You're just an annoying worm that I will crush," shouted Rimuru in fury as he charged his sword with demonic magic. "That's enough. Stop it, both of you," Azusa pointed out, crying, as she could feel the hatred, anger and rage emanating from both of them. She was desperately trying to outwit Rimuru's clones to no avail. "Stop, please. This doesn't have to end this way," Azusa shouted at both of them to no avail as she desperately struggled to outwit Rimuru's clones. "I will pierce your heart with my sword. I will erase your soul from existence itself," Rimuru shouted furiously, as he channeled more power into his sword. The conflict was reaching a key point. Rimuru, with his demonic sword at the ready, launched himself at the Herald of the Gods. For his part, Tuya, being exhausted by the battle, used light magic emanating from his hands to blind his opponent. A flash temporarily mowed down the area. Even so, the Demon Lord did not hesitate and directed all his fury and strength against the heir of God. For a moment Tuya resigned himself to his fate, for his strength had reached its limit. He used all the little divinity he had left in that blinding attack. "I know I'm done. This is all I can do," stammered Tuya in a low voice. Azusa could feel how that demonic power was just a few centimeters away from Tuya's body. It all seemed over for the heir of God if it wasn't for the determination of Azusa, the immortal witch, who in a second that Rimuru had lost concentration outwitted the clones and rushed towards where Tuya was. Azusa had used a divine ability to get in front of Tuya and place herself between the two to stop them. However, the Demon Lord, blinded by the rage that was overpowering him, did not notice until it was too late. "Stop, Rimuru, this is not," Azusa pointed out, only to be quickly silenced by the edge of Rimuru's towering sword. Without realizing it, Rimuru had pierced Azusa's heart. A moment of silence was experienced at the instant that the flash of the Herald of God had vanished. It was not for less, because a tragic scene was in front of everyone, something that left the two opponents paralyzed. "Triple A Azusa," they both shouted as Rimuru let go of his sword in fright and Tuya caught Azusa's falling body towards him. "No, no, no," Tuya shouted as he tried to use magic to heal Azusa's wounds, but it was impossible. Not only were the wounds not healing, her body was losing all her divine aura, and in a matter of seconds the immortal witch, the girl blessed by the gods, had succumbed to the Demon Lord's sword. Everyone present in the battle had felt that sensation. A disturbance of fear, sadness and mortification enveloped those present, allies and enemies alike. for the girl for whom their leaders fought had died at his hands. Tempe's saint, Tuya shouted in fury as crimson tears filled his eyes, as the divinity that fell from Azusa began to merge with his own. I didn't want this. Rimuru was saying as he saw his hands covered in his beloved's blood. The guilt was sinking him deeper and deeper into anguish and despair. You killed Hereee, Tuya shouted angrily as he laid Azusa's lifeless body on the ground. Rimuru replied dejectedly, unable to process the scene. It was no wonder. With his own hands he had killed the person he was trying to make smile again. You turned her against me. You filled her mind with your lies, pointed out the demon lord. Don't blame me for that, you wretch, you bastard. Tuya shouted as he threw himself back into the conflict. And even though Rimuru was mentally shattered, he was still up for the fight. The battle was resumed immediately. They no longer cared about their wounds, they no longer cared about the people around them, they no longer held back. The clash of their blows no longer echoed on the battlefield. Their blows were literally as powerful as a cataclysmic explosion that both their allies and their enemies were left in the middle of it. Every blow they struck was fatal to life itself in that world, and as they continued to engage in their battle, life in that world became extinct. Why did they come to such a degree? Why? Azusa said to herself as she continued to watch the battle. She couldn't help it. Rimuru was supposed to have pierced her heart and her soul was erased from existence. But her soul was stranded in that world, watching the person she once loved fight against the boy she met recently. Is this my punishment? Azusa asked herself. It was not for less. She always blamed Rimuru for the demise of her precious daughters, but in this short time she understood that she was not the only one who had suffered that loss. Rimuru always carried that pain in her chest. He never returned to be as he was before. His happiness had died the same day his daughters had perished. Of course it's your punishment. Witch of the Altiplano. A voice was heard from behind Azusa. She was paralyzed when she heard it. She could recognize that voice easily. Years had passed, but a mother never forgets the voice of her children. Sandra, Azusa pointed out, somewhat frightened. Wow, you remember my name? Tell me, is it guilt for abandoning me? Pointed out the girl staring at the one she once called mother. Said Azusa, but she didn't know what to say. It is true that she felt very bad when Sandra abandoned the family after the incident of her daughters and returned to Beelzebub's side. You must feel very happy, don't you? You blamed Mr. Rimuru for the death of my sisters. You broke his heart and his mind by rubbing his face in his failure. And then after so many years without seeing him you didn't listen to him and treated him like dirt when he went to visit my sister's grave. Sandra was saying to her mother, calmly analyzing the situation. No, I would never, Azusa pointed out, crying, but was interrupted by her daughter. Not only that, but that you pushed him to bring his decisions to this point. Furthermore, the fact that you cajoled the heir of God with your charms to make him feel something for you so that he would fight more spitefully against Rimuru. You are an ordinary slut, how cursed can you be? She replied with a sinister smile. You're wrong. I'm not, Azusa said in despair. Still with your lies, you Highland witch. Why don't you accept your actions? Although, well, maybe no one exists anymore to be able to forgive you after this conflict? Suddenly two more voices were heard in unison. It can't be. Girls? Azusa said between tears. It was not for less that one of her daughters told her things was devastating for her, but that the daughters she lost accepted such a statement was a withering blow for her. No. Azusa said as she fell to her knees on the floor. You are a disgrace as a mother and as a person, a vile woman who wants to cause chaos, Falfa pointed out, as the three daughters surrounded their mother. What was your motive? You wanted to get to heaven and have an affair with the heir of God. I guess we were a burden to your new life, so you pushed us aside, Shalsha pointed out. No. I would never do anything to you. I never wanted this to happen. Azusa answered between tears and looking at the ground. I guess you killed us to have something in common with Mr. Tuya, so you could have a bond and get closer to his side. Blame it on Rimuru so that soon after you ended up in a battle to the death, Falfa affirmed. No, that's a lie. I would never do something like that, Azusa shouted while she was still crying as she was devastated to hear her daughters talking about her like that. Look, mother. Your dream has just come true, Sandra told her while pulling her hair to make her look up, and what she saw was something that totally devastated her. In front of her eyes Rimuru had thrust his sword into Tuya's heart, and in turn Tuya had used his divinity to make Rimuru a normal human momentarily, enough time for the poison he had previously thrown to take effect. And so both opponents fell to the ground, the demon lord and the herald of the gods had met their end in a battle that threatened existence itself. There were no winners, only the vestiges of what were once the most powerful beings in existence. NNO NNO NNO. Azusa shouted in pain, for the moment she feared had happened. She felt terrible, for hearing what her daughters said filled her with pain, for something inside her was beginning to grow again. A feeling of contempt for herself flooded her. Your pathetic life will go on. You will live alone for the rest of your spiritual existence for your crimes, pointed out Sandra. That is until the gods decide your fate, affirmed Falfa. And I would not expect a pardon, after all. In your hands is the death of the heir of the god of creation. Your pathetic soul does not compare with the loss of such a great fault to the divine kingdom, Shalsha affirmed. At the same time the three of them turned into mist and joined together to create a dark dragon. Girls, what's going on? Azusa said worriedly to her daughters. It was logical, although they have told her so many things, in Azusa's heart they will always be her precious daughters. Witch of the Altiplano, prepare for your final destiny, pointed the dark dragon, trying to attack the Witch of the Altiplano. Brunhild stance, Kokino technique, reverse slash. Brunhild stance, Lestia cut, diagonal attack, was heard from a blow that came by surprise to the dragon. Come to my light, shining spears, shining javelin, sounded in time with the attacks. And while the dragon roared as it received the attacks, two girls approached Azusa. Stand up, Highland girl, said a beautiful girl with long silver hair. You have to get out of this nightmare, little blonde. Rimuru and Tuya are waiting for you, the girl pointed. She could recognize her even though she had never met them. Ye, Hild, Sue, Els and Lean had made themselves present in front of her. Tuya's former wives stood in front of the Highland Witch. Is this real? Azusa pointed out incredulously as the rest of the girls smiled at her. It depends on what you think is real, dear Azusa, Lean pointed out. Azusa, you have to help us. Rimuru is in danger of himself. Tuya and you both have to get to Rimuru before it's too late. A girl's voice was heard behind her. My God,